and welcome back. We are continuing a dramatic reading of Ishmael, a novel by Daniel Quinn, and we're picking up on chapter 9, my friends. Not chapter 9, not just chapter 9. It's section 9. Of the book. And we're going to pick up there, section 9. This is technically what you would consider, they don't label the sort of section pages, but they keep track. It's 159 in the 25th Anniversary Edition, right here that I have. Page 159. We'll skip ahead a couple of those blank pages to 161. Chapter 1 of Part 9. When I arrived the next day, I found that a new plan was in effect. Ishmael was no longer on the other side of the glass. He was on my side of it, sprawled on some cushions a few feet from my chair. I hadn't realized how important that sheet of glass had become to our relationship. To be honest, I felt a flutter in my stomach. Can you imagine going in through a door where you used to be on the other side of, you'd assume, like bulletproof glass, plate glass or something, and now this enormous animal that, let's be honest, could tear you limb from limb if it needed to or felt threatened is in the room with you. Powerful, interesting, a little disconcerting. I felt a flutter of alarm in my stomach. His nearness and enormity disconcerted me. But without hesitating for more than a fraction of a second, I took my seat and gave him my usual nod of greeting. He nodded back. But I thought I glimpsed a look of wary speculation in his eyes, as if my proximity troubled him as much as it troubled me. Before we go on, Ishmael said after a few moments, I want to clear up a misconception. He held up a pad of drawing paper with a diagram on it. Here's what it says here. Here's what it says here. Take a close look at that. Screenshot if you need be, or pause for discussion, but there it is. Excuse me. Not a particularly difficult visualization. It represents the storyline of the levers, he said. Yes, I see. He added something and held it up. That's this part. This offshoot began around 8000 BC. Beginning at 8000 BC represents the storyline of the takers. Right. And what event does this represent? He asked, touching the point of his pencil to the dot labeled 8000 BC. The agricultural revolution? Did you guess that? Sure you did. Did this event occur at a point in time or over a period of time? I assume over a period of time. Then this dot at 8000 BC represents what? The beginning of the revolution? Where shall I put the dot to show when it ended? Ah, I said witlessly, I don't really know. It must have lasted a couple of thousand years. What event marked the end of the revolution? Again, I don't know. I don't know that any particular event would have marked it. No popping champagne corks? I don't know. Think. I thought. And after a while said, okay, it's strange that this isn't taught. I remember being taught about the agricultural revolution, but I don't remember this. Go on. It didn't end. It just spread. It's been spreading ever since it began, back there 10,000 years ago. It spread across the continent during the 18th and 19th centuries. It's still spreading across parts of New Zealand and Africa and South America today. Of course. So you see, your agricultural revolution is not an event like the Trojan War, isolated in the distant past and without direct relevance to your lives today. The work begun by those Neolithic farmers in the Near East has been carried forward from one generation to the next without a single break, right into the present moment. It's the foundation of your vast civilization today in exactly the same way that it was the foundation of the very first farming village. Yes, I see that. This should help you understand why the story you tell your children about the meaning of the world, about divine intentions in the world, and about the destiny of man is of such profound importance to the people of your culture. It's the manifesto of the revolution of which your culture is based. It's the repository of all your revolutionary doctrine and the definitive expression of your revolutionary spirit. It explains why the revolution was necessary and why it must be carried forward at any cost whatever. Yes, I said. That's quite a thought. Chapter 2 of Part 9. 164. About 2,000 years ago, Ishmael went on, an event of exquisite irony occurred within your culture. The takers, or at least a very large segment of them, adopted as their own a story that seemed to them pregnant with meaning and mystery. It came to them from a taker, people of the Near East, who had been telling it to their own children for countless generations, for so many generations that it had become a mystery, even to them. Do you know why? Why it had become a mystery? No. It had become a mystery because those who first told the story, their ancient ancestors, were not takers, but leavers. I sat there for a while, blinking at him. Then I asked him if he'd mind running that past me again. About 2,000 years ago, the takers adopted as their own story, a story that had originated among leavers many centuries before. Okay, what's the irony in that? The irony is that it was a story that had once been told among the leavers about the origins of the takers. So, the takers adopted as their own a leaver story about their origins. I'm afraid I just don't get it. What sort of story would a leaver people tell about the appearance of the takers in the world? God, I have no idea. Ishmael peered at me owlishly. You seem to have forgotten to take your brainy pill this morning. Never mind. I'll tell you a story of my own, and then you'll see it. Okay. Ishmael shifted his mountainous bulk into a new position on his pillows, and involuntarily I closed my eyes, thinking, if a stranger were to open the door and walk in at this moment, what on earth would they think? This is halfway down, or a third of the way down, page 165. Let's go to chapter 3. There's a very special knowledge you must have if you're going to rule the world, Ishmael said. I'm sure you realize that. Frankly, I've never thought about it. The takers possess this knowledge, of course. At least they imagine they do. And they're very, very proud of it. This is the most fundamental knowledge of all, and it's absolutely indispensable to those who would rule the world. And what do you suppose the takers find when they go among the leavers? I don't know what you mean. They find that the leavers do not have this knowledge. Isn't that remarkable? I don't know. Consider it. The takers have a knowledge that enables them to rule the world, and the leavers lack it. This is what the missionaries found whenever they went among the leavers. They were quite astonished themselves because they had the impression that this knowledge was virtually self-evident. I don't even know what knowledge you're talking about. It's the knowledge that's needed to rule the world. Okay, but specifically, what knowledge is that? You'll learn from the story. What I'm looking at right now is who has this knowledge. I told you that the takers have it, and that makes sense, doesn't it? The takers are the rulers of the world, aren't they? Yes. And the leavers don't have it, and that too makes sense, doesn't it? I guess so. Now tell me this. Who else would have this knowledge besides the takers? I have no idea. Think mythologically. Okay, the gods would have it. Of course, And that's what my story is about, how the gods acquired the knowledge they needed to rule the world. Shall we hear what that is? Let's go to chapter 4. One day, Ishmael began. So this is just a long narrative now, no more quotes of Ishmael telling a story. One day, the gods were considering the administration of the world in the ordinary way, and one of them said, "Here's a spot I've been thinking about for a while, a wide, pleasant savanna. Let's send a great multitude of locusts into this land. Then the fire of life will grow prodigiously in them, and in the birds and lizards that will feed on them, and that will be very fine." The others thought about this for a while. Then one said, "It's certainly true that, if we send the locusts into this land, the fire of life will blaze in them and in the creatures that feed on them, but at the expense of all the other creatures that live there." The others asked him what his point was, and he went on, "Surely it would be a great crime to deprive all these other creatures of the fire of life, so that the locusts and the birds and the lizards can flourish for a time? For the locusts will strip the land bare, and the deer and the gazelles and the goats and the rabbits will go hungry and die. And with the disappearance of the game, the lions and the wolves and the foxes will soon be dying too. Won't they curse us then and call us criminals for favoring the locusts and the birds and the lizards over them?" Now the gods had to scratch their heads over this, because they'd never looked at matters in this particular light before. But finally, one of them said, "I don't see that this presents any great problem. We simply won't do it. We won't raise a multitude of locusts to send into this land, and then things will go on as before, and no one will have any reason to curse us." Most of the gods thought this made sense, but one of them disagreed. Surely this would be as great a crime as the other. For don't the locusts and the birds and the lizards live in our hands as well as the rest? Is it never to be their time to flourish greatly, as others do?" And while the gods were debating this point, a fox came out to hunt. And they said, "Let's send the fox a quail for its life." But these words were hardly spoken when one of them said, "Surely it would be a crime to let the fox live at the quail's expense. The quail has its life that we gave it, and lives in our hands. It would be infamous to send it into the jaws of the fox." Now, you're obviously following the metaphor, but as a parent myself, I find myself challenged, actually even very recently, to tell a story to my son or daughters about animals that we attempt to be sort of like real, living in the ocean or living in the woods. And then you have to sort of admit, this fish eats smaller fish, or this animal's a carnivore. So in order for its children to live, what do they eat? You're going to act out a scene of the mother feeding the children. If this animal mother and the children live off of any other animal, you got to talk to your children about the fact that the cute little whatever is going to have to get eaten. It's not always a plant or something like that. Challenging, right? So parents or anybody who has ever played a game involving animals in an ecosystem, which one is the cuter one that gets to live and be the eater of the other thing and be the protagonist in my story? A little bit of a catch-22. We can relate to this. That's all I'm saying. Then another said, "Look here, the quail is stalking a grasshopper. If we don't give the quail to the fox, then the quail will eat the grasshopper. Doesn't the grasshopper have its life that we gave it? And doesn't it live in our hands as truly as the quail? Surely it would be a crime not to give the quail to the fox so that the grasshopper might live." Well, as you can imagine, the gods groaned heavily over this and didn't know what to do. And while they were wrangling over it, spring came, and the snow waters of the mountains began to swell the streams, and one of them said, "Surely it would be a crime to let these waters flood the land, for countless creatures are bound to be carried off to their deaths." But then another said, "Surely it would be a crime not to let these waters flood the land, for without them the ponds and marshes will dry up, and all the creatures that live in them will die." And once more the gods were thrown into confusion. Finally, one of them had what seemed to be a new thought. "It's clear that any action we take will be good for some and evil for others. So let's take no action at all. Then none of the creatures that live in our hands can call us criminals." Nonsense, another snapped. If we take no action at all, this will also be good for some and evil for others, won't it? The creatures that live in our hands will say, look, we suffer, and the gods do nothing. Sounds very similar to our fellow human creatures might say at times, no matter what happens, right? They did something, or they didn't do something, or they should have, or whatever. And while the gods bickered amongst themselves, the locusts swarmed over the savannah, and the locusts and the birds and the lizards praised the gods, while the game and the predators died, cursing the gods. And because the gods had taken no action in the matter, the quail lived, and the fox went hungry to its hole, cursing the gods. And because the quail lived, it ate the grasshopper, and the grasshopper died, cursing the gods. And because, in the end, the gods decided to stem the flood of spring waters, the ponds and the marshes dried up, and all the thousands of creatures that lived in them died and cursed the gods. And hearing all these curses, the gods groaned, we've made the garden a place of terror, and all that live in it hate us as tyrants and criminals. And they're right to do this because by action or inaction we send them good one day and evil the next without knowing what we should do. The savannah stripped by the locust rings with curses, and we have no answer to make. The fox and the grasshopper curse us because we let the quail live, and we have no answer to make. Surely the whole world must curse the day we made it, for we are criminals who send good and evil by turns, knowing even as we do it that we don't know what ought to be done. Well, the gods were sinking right into the slough of despond when one of them looked up and said, Say, didn't we make for the garden a certain tree whose fruit is the knowledge of good and evil? Yes, cried the others. Let's find that tree and eat it and see what this knowledge is. And when the gods had found this tree and tasted its fruit, their eyes were open and they said, Now indeed we have the knowledge we need to tend the garden without becoming criminals and without earning the curses of all who live in our hands. And as they were talking in this way, a lion went out to hunt, and the gods said to themselves, Today is the lion's day to go hungry, and the deer it would have taken may live another day. And so the lion missed its kill, and as it was returning, hungry to its den, it began to curse the gods. But they said, Be at peace, for we know how to rule the world, and today is your day to go hungry. And the lion was at peace. And the next day the lion went out to hunt, and the gods sent it the deer they had spared the day before. And as the deer felt the lion's jaws on its neck, it began to curse the gods. But they said, Be at peace, for we know how to rule the world, and today is your day to die, just as yesterday was your day to live. And the deer was at peace. Then the gods said to themselves, Certainly the knowledge of good and evil is a powerful knowledge, for it enables us to rule the world without becoming criminals. If we had yesterday sent the lion away hungry without this knowledge, then indeed it would have been a crime. And if we had today sent the deer into the lion's jaws without this knowledge, then indeed this too would have been a crime. But with this knowledge we have done both of these things, one seemingly opposed to the other, and have committed no crime. Now it happened that one of the gods was away on an errand when the others were eating at the tree of knowledge. And when he returned and heard what the gods had done in the matter of the lion and the deer, he said, In doing these two things, you have surely committed a crime in one instance or the other. For these two things are opposed, and one must have been right to do, and the other wrong. If it was good for the lion to go hungry on the first day, then it was evil to send it the deer on the second. Or if it was good to send it the deer on the second day, then it was evil to send it away hungry on the first. The others nodded and said, Yes, this is just the way we would have reasoned before we ate the tree of knowledge. What knowledge is this? The god asked, noticing the tree for the first time. Taste its fruit, they told him. Then you'll know exactly what knowledge is. So the god tasted it, and his eyes were opened. Yes, I see, he said. This is indeed the proper knowledge of the gods. The knowledge, this is all in italics now, the knowledge of who shall live and who shall die. That's the end of chapter 4. Let's go on to chapter 5. It's literally 2 sentences. Halfway down 171. Any questions so far? Ishmael asked. I jumped, startled by this break in his narrative. No, this is fascinating. Ishmael went on. And unfortunately, chapter 6 just looks to be a little bit too long. Sorry, I'm just giving you short doses here, but I hope you appreciate just a few more chapters. We've broken into section 9 here, gotten 4 chapters in. Hopefully you appreciate that. And wow, so more creative use of metaphors, allegory, whatever you want to call it. I've just never heard before. I don't know about you. Really cool to get these different angles and takes and to start to come around to sort of to how we conclude what we conclude as a Western developed society, whatever you want to call us, capitalist society, whatever your label is. It's not been mentioned specifically here other than the takers, which I think is nice. So yeah, we're starting to come around to like, what is our true like mythology and set of beliefs, and how sort of contradictory or bankrupt or whatever the conclusion we're drawing towards here is. And we'll really find out the rounded conclusion, I think, in the rest of chapter 9. So stick with me. Thanks again for subscribing, for feedback, support, comments. That always spurns me on. You know, this is a labor of love. I'm a one-man band here. I appreciate all the comments. I notice every single one. So thanks so much again for that feedback. Glad you found the channel, and I hope to see you on the next one.